Fast results versus soft approach. I'm going to get this episode or this particular topic for this episode from the book I wrote, Info Every Dog Trainer Should Know. You can find this on Amazon. There's a bunch of other articles that I wrote several years ago that I compiled together and put it into a book. As I'm reading it again now, this was written years ago, so I'm rereading it again now. I find things that obviously I would have done a little bit different. I would have written a little bit different. My thoughts on things have definitely evolved. And so as I'm rereading it, I'm making these mental edits. And as I'm doing these things, I'm going to be talking about them on the podcast. So that way I can give you guys some info on that. But I thought this was a really good topic. This is a good chapter in the book. Fast results versus the soft approach. So we're talking about that. Look, if a client brings you a dog, if you're a dog trainer, the book is Info Every Dog Trainer Should Know. So the target audience here are dog trainers. So if you're a dog trainer and a client brings you a dog and they tell you, hey, my dog is doing this, that, and the other. It's pulling, it's jumping, it's being rude. It's, doing these things that I don't want it to do. Can you help me with that? Well, there's typically a couple of approaches you can take depending on what kind of trainer you are, depending on your skill set, a bunch of things. Your beliefs about training, all of that influences what kind of approach you're going to take. But generally speaking, it'll be one or two categories. And I'm generalizing here. The one category will be you're going to get it done quick. You're going to use pressure, and I'm generalizing, so I'm not saying everybody does this. But you're going to use pressure, and your goal is going to be how do I make this quick and efficient for the client? You know what I mean? That'll be your priority. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it, depending on who you are, your approach might be, I want to really understand what's going on. I really want to make sure that I don't cause any stress. I want to make sure that I really see what could be happening. And so rather than just work on the mechanics, I really want to understand. So those are generally the two approaches that people are going to take. And so that's what the articles was written about. So I'm going to read you a little bit of this, break it down, and then make some edits as I go. So this is on page 104 of the book. Too many dog trainers are focused on an agenda and less focused on the well-being of the dog and the client. Fast results versus the soft, positive approach. The fast results approach addresses the client's needs. Every client that comes to you has some sort of problem they cannot solve on their own. Many times these issues have been progressing over a period of time to a level that is often unbearable. Being able to address a client's need to solve the issue immediately may seem the best, most logical approach. There are times in which relief is just a matter of changing the routine, the technique, or miscommunication. There is, however, the risk of getting caught up in the let's fix it now mindset, and here's why. You cannot quickly change perception with a long learning history. And as a side note, I still believe that has not changed. Okay, that statement alone at least. Oh, yes, I can. I put that on quotes, right? So it says, you cannot quickly change a perception with a long learning history. Oh, yes, I can, you might be saying, right? And of course, I'm putting here, this is where I definitely talk different than I wrote. And I put, look, dipshit. We know you can ramp up the level on your e-collar and dominate the dog with a swift helicopter and call it a day. This only gives temporary relief that will haunt the client later or come back with a vengeance. Even though now it's a side note here, even though that's not the most tactful way of saying it, I agree with that. I firmly believe to this day, you cannot just go, all right, hey, you know what? Let's just fix it right now. Yeah, you can certainly crank up your e-collar and just pop the dog back and forth, and you can get it done in a day, in a session. Now, granted, sometimes I do feel like we need to address it yesterday. Okay, sometimes I will add some pressure, but not to the extent where the dog is, hiding, freaking out. Not to that extent. And I've seen videos and I've seen people that do take that approach. Like they're just now, like we're doing it now, and like they do this miracle, 5-minute session where the dog now is not even looking freaking anywhere else. You can see the body language. So yes, you can do that, but it is going to have some sort of side effect, as I wrote here, in a less tactful way. Okay, so I continue. A dog is an animal that accumulates perceptions and experience. The risk of confusion is high when trying to undo behaviors with a long learning history in a short period of time. Meaning, if the dog has a learning history that is lengthy, that could be several months, which could be a long period of time if you have a young dog, or that could be several years. If a dog has a learning history of a particular behavior, has an association to something, and it behaves a certain way because of that association, and it's been happening for several months or several years, well, to undo that in one session, right, or in a handful of sessions, that could have some side effects. You're putting a lot of pressure on the dog. So that's where I wanted to expand a little bit. All right, you may be tempted to put every dog in the same category. And I'm going back to the book now. When you get used to fixing, and I put that in quotes, when you get used to fixing everything in a very short period of time, you fall into the trap of looking at the dogs like there are numbers and not like individuals, which is true. That can happen. I know this because I've fallen into that trap before, and I was actually just thinking that, or outside of the book, I was just thinking that too. Or sometimes I have to snap myself out of it, and instead of going, all right, this is dog number 3, today, I have to remember, I have to make myself more, more emotionally available to the process rather than just going mechanics. So going back to the book, I have fallen into that trap myself. It's part of being complacent, which I agree, right? You quickly, quote unquote, fix a dog, and then the next, and then the next, and so on and so forth. Then you run into a dog that you're not able to, quote unquote, fix as quickly as you did the others. And so you jam more pressure, more force into the technique. Or you bring the level higher and higher. That's a complacency issue. And I can tell you full transparency, I sometimes get caught up in that, where I'm like, all right, we need to do more of that. We need to do more of that. And I have to snap myself out of it and go, all right, something isn't working here. I need to find another approach. So it does happen, guys. Okay. If you're not careful, it can consume your style. Now, back to the book. It's important that as dog trainers, we look at every dog we work with as individuals. Yes, there are a lot of patterns, but ultimately each dog has a unique temperament with a unique set of experiences and perceptions. Therefore, you can't just fix every dog the same way. Now, the soft approach. The soft approach addresses the comfort and well-being of the dog in the learning process. This is where many dog trainers want to be. It's a category in which purely positive trainers fit in. There are several people that advocate, push, and even politically pressure for the sake of this movement. Though I greatly appreciate the well-being of the dogs and the intelligent approach of dog training, there are also downfalls to this approach. Dogs need to learn what not to do. Okay? Now I put it as a quote. That's why you teach the dog what to do instead, you abuser. So I'm being a little bit facetious here, right? So I put on quotes. That's why you teach the dog what to do instead, you abuser. But yeah, so I put dogs need to learn what not to do. Okay, that's the thing. They need to learn. They need to get feedback on what is not acceptable. So I go back to the book. Calm down before you spill your pumpkin latte and listen. I'm all about teaching incompatible behaviors to give the dogs new skills to replace old bad habits. There are, however, instances in which you have to use pressure to train dogs, and that hasn't changed. I believe that. Yes, I said have to, okay, because along with knowing what to do, it's also imperative that the dog know what not to do. To drive the speed limit, you also may have learned through experience that it is a bad idea to test those limits. You more than likely did things your parents or teachers instructed you not to do and were given consequences that stopped the frequency of those behaviors. This doesn't mean you were abused. It doesn't advocate abuse at all. So, getting out of the book for a second, you've all learned what not to do through experience. Okay, you learned, I should probably not do that. That was a bad idea. Okay, you can only make so many bad choices before that pattern of punishment sets in. And I said punishment, I don't mean like the moral definition of punishment. I mean the dog training operant learning theory definition. We're just going to keep it nice and simple. Any consequence that reduces the likelihood or the frequency of a behavior is by definition, in those terms, called punishment. So you touch the stove so many times before you realize this is not a good idea. It's not working out for me. Now, if you keep doing that, there might be something wrong with you. But dogs typically are pretty good at understanding that. So they need to be able to understand what no means. All right, back to the book. Another thing that it does, that the soft approach does, why it can be a little bit of an issue, is because it leads to loss of patience, which is true. Okay, yes, purely positive trainers lose their patience too. And this is where I've heard these stories, and I'm telling you, you hear about this. It's not isolated events. It happens, okay? I've heard of this and seen it myself. Dog trainers who claim to be force-free and pride themselves in using hands-off approach while simultaneously yanking the shit out of the dog with a gentle leader or other head harness. Well, what do you expect when the owner has invested thousands of dollars and all you have to show for it is a half-assed sit with food in your hand or several lures and no discipline? That's what happens when you try to take your time. You have to be able to use pressure. If you just go, no, I just don't want the dog to experience that. So this is where the soft approach is a bit of a problem versus the fast approach. I think both of them, and if you are a reasonable person, as a reasonable person, you agree. Okay, yes, the fast approach is definitely not always ideal. Most of the time, it's not ideal. But also the really let's take our sweet time and analyze and really look and take and meditate on it and do all of that. Look, that's going to take you forever. The client is spending a lot of money to try to get results. They don't want to get this, just use this gentle leader, this no pull harness, and then just avoid these areas. Well, no shit. They didn't need to pay you thousands of dollars to know that. And you will lose the patience. You will lose your patience. You are gonna get sick and tired of it, and you are gonna lose your shit like some of these purely positive trainers do. I know trainers who have worked for purely positive trainers that would tell me that their trainers, the people they work for, purely positive trainers, would yank the shit out of the dogs with gentle leaders, which is horrible. It's so bad for their spine, so bad for their neck. You don't correct the dog with the gentle leader. It's not what it's meant to do. It puts so much pressure on the spine. I'd rather you correct the dog with the prong collar than with the freaking gentle leader. The damage that the gentle leader will do with the correction will be far more intense than the same correction with the prong collar. And I've also seen those videos. Okay, I've saw a video one time of this was a long time ago. It was Gene Donaldson. It was this other guy, this purely positive trainer. He's a doctor. Forgot his name. I don't really follow him that much. But he's like a behaviorist. I know the name's gonna come to me the moment I stop recording. But anyways, it was this guy and Gene Donaldson just kind of working with these reactive dogs. It was a long time ago, and they're trying to make one of the dogs sit with the gentle leader. They're basically yanking the shit out of the dog to force it into a sit. How is that force free? How is that purely positive? It definitely isn't. But anyway, going back to the book. So what's the solution? Okay, the solution is advocate for the dog, use pressure once the dog understands what is expected, and be transparent with your client. Use whatever you need to do. Be transparent with your client. The client just wants the problem gone. Okay, the client does not want to be a dog trainer. More often than not, that's the case. They don't want to know the case studies. They don't want to know the lab. They don't want to see the lab results. They're not interested in that. They want their dogs to stop doing what they're currently doing. They want their dogs to behave better. Okay, they don't want to geek out on the process. So do what is the most effective thing, keeping the dog's well-being at the forefront. Okay, the client just wants the problem gone. It's our job as trainers to communicate that this process takes a bit of teaching, and based on the dog's individual needs, it may take a bit of time. Sometimes it does take time. Okay, sometimes it does. Sometimes it takes longer than you anticipate. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily a bad trainer. Sometimes the dog that you're working with takes longer. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a combination of temperament, experiences, all of that goes into, plus the client's expectations. There are things that sometimes make it so that you have to take a little bit of extra time for the sake of the dog. Okay. Sometimes you can and even should quickly stop dangerous behaviors, at least temporarily, in order to undo and teach a better way to cope. That I still agree with. That has not changed much. Okay, so as far as my belief goes, I've had clients that their dogs are showing dangerous behaviors, and not like dangerous as in they're gonna freaking kill somebody. Not like that. More like, yeah, if the dog got a hold of another dog, it wouldn't be good. Okay, I've had clients that their well-being, the client's well-being, meaning if the dog kept acting up, the apartment complex was going to do something about it. So in those instances, we're like, hey, we got to use pressure right away. We got to fix this yesterday. So we'll use some pressure right away to get the point across, but then we'll keep expanding on what we've done. And so it's not just, all right, you're done. 3 minutes in, you're done. We're still taking our time. I have, on occasion, used hard corrections, at least to get the dog to stop engaging in these potentially dangerous behaviors. This isn't the norm, and it's not the standard operating procedure, but at times necessary. Okay, some examples are violent redirecting, predatory targeting, crittering, snake proofing, garbage raiding, among others. Some of these other behaviors, obviously, whatever you're told by the client that makes you both believe, yeah, we need to address this right away. It's not sustainable. We need to fix it ASAP. So sometimes we do have to amp up the pressure a little bit more. In general, as a closing statement here on the article, in general, learning more, reading more, and training more will make you a better trainer. Don't just follow blindly. Stop, analyze what you're doing, and reevaluate yourself constantly. So reading this article, even though I wrote it years ago, some of the other articles, I'm like, yeah, I don't feel exactly like that 100% anymore. And I wouldn't have written that exactly the way I wrote it several years ago. But this article is pretty spot on. Okay, this makes sense to me. That has not changed much like some of the other articles. Yeah, my language definitely a little bit different, but that makes sense to me. Okay, those are the two typical ways we're gonna fix it like right away every single time with every single dog, or we're gonna take freaking 5 months and we'll just keep bleeding the client, because we really want to, not add any pressure. We really want to understand. Look, at the end of the day, it's a dog. You have to use some pressure, but you also want to use your brain and analyze to an extent why it's happening, what needs to be done about it. If you like this video, if you like this episode, share it with somebody else. Make sure you follow the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.